Deborah is an award-winning bespoke shoemaker or cordwainer, who is one half of Carréducker with James Ducker, where they make handmade hand-sewn shoes to commission using traditional heritage techniques. They're champions of heritage craft of shoemaking, an important part of the British trade, passing on the skills of the trade to students from around the world. And Deborah's also a recipient of a QEST scholarship and has now become a trustee of QEST. Good evening, Deborah.
Thank you for the intro. That's lovely.
So shall we start at the beginning? So we know you're a very busy person with many projects, but let's start at the beginning of your journey. How did you first get involved in bespoke shoemaking and leatherworking?
Oh, how far to go back? So I guess I developed an appreciation for having things that would last a long time, that were made well, from my mother, because she had beautiful hand-sewn shoes and leather goods. And she had come from the States and moved to Sark, where she met my dad and stayed. Sark is not somewhere where you necessarily have beautiful, lovely leather goods. So these lovely things would sit in a box in her wardrobe. And from time to time, I would take them out and dream of having tiny feet that could actually fit in them. I'm built like my dad, not like my mum. But anyway, it's sort of, and growing up on Sark also, we had a strong appreciation for having things that were made to last. We were very mindful of waste. It's a small island, it's hard to get rid of things. So we would repair our own clothes. I would make clothes with my mum. So the deep-seated in my childhood are those values. I went away to school when I was 11. I went to Guernsey to school, and it was a very academic school. And my sort of escape place was the art room. And I was very fortunate to win or to go to St. Martin's to do my foundation course at 17. So I came to London as a teenager. Had a very good time, and then realized that I probably needed to knuckle down and work very hard in order to get my degree. And I went to the University of Lancashire, or University of Lancashire as it is now, as Preston Poly back then. And I studied fashion design and marketing, and my final degree collection was a range of boots and shoes. I was very fortunate to be sponsored by Trickers in Northampton. So I went down there and I worked with their pattern cutting team, the closing team, and their shoemakers. And I really fell in love with the complexity of the craft, because it's one of the most difficult leather crafts. There's over 200 steps in the process. And I thought, I like a difficult challenge. This is for me. But I didn't really know what to do or how to get into the trade. Trickers were really supportive, but I really wasn't someone. I was straight out of design college. I just didn't really have a clue. A sandwich course. So I was offered a job by one of my bosses during my sandwich course at a PR company. I worked in PR for 8 years. And during that time, I did evening classes at cordwainers. And one of the wonderful people training me was a QEST scholar called Claire Flaherty. And she was teaching me hand-sewn shoemaking. And she said, if you're interested in doing this as a career, as a job, then you should apply to QEST and go from there. And it was probably one of the most intimidating interviews I've ever been on. Wood-panelled room, 8 men behind a big desk. As I say, design students straight out of college at the university, sort of, really not too sure what I was doing. But I did a presentation, and I was very fortunate to be granted a scholarship. And the training that I was, so Claire had introduced me to Paul Wilson, and he became my my shoemaking guru, if you like, for 4 years. So without him being generous enough to offer that training to me, as someone who hadn't been a shoemaker before, was really exceptional. So that's kind of my journey into the sort of the training of the craft.
Great. I mean, it seems like you've had quite a more direct route than some, maybe. I think some people take longer to find that thing that they're really passionate about. You've spoken about Paul Wilson and the role models that you've had in Paul and other people like John Lobb when you were a young shoemaker.
Thank
How
you for using
important?
the word young.
Sorry.
I retrained when I was in my late 20s,
Okay,
when I was 30 actually.
okay.
So
I didn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
effectively young, but not really that young
So young to
compared to
shoes then.
today. Yeah, very young.
How important was it to have those role models as you were training, and do you now see yourself as a role model for the next generation?
I think that's so. I wouldn't necessarily class Lob as a role model for me at that point. I had yeah, I had big ideas about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be doing. Um, and really, I think for me, Paul was definitely a role model in terms of his generosity of sharing his skills and training. I met wonderful people in the trade. Through him, he introduced me to various people like Terry Moore at Foster's, so sort of real names. But because I was really focused on the design side, I guess, and what I could do with the design and the heritage craft, I was really sort of looking towards people like Bill Amberg, who had started out as small independent business, and at that point was really sort of going quite meteoric. Um, People like Georgina Goodman, who had that mix of design and heritage. She had a workshop, a showroom, I think it was in Shepherd's Bush Market, with a glass floor, so you could see the workshop downstairs. So Claire, who obviously taught me, um, Caroline Groves, because she started to lead the way in terms of couture for footwear, sort of really exotic and flamboyant. So that was really the direction that I was going. That's what I was interested in. I really loved the heritage craft, but I wanted to try to do something with it. And if anybody's seen the collection that I produced at the end of my degree, they'll see that it at that point was really quite different. So it's ankle to thigh length boots, it's gaiters, it's knee pads, it's buckles and lacing, and yeah, very masculine, quite sexy, quite strong. So yeah, that's sort of where I'd kind of come from. So John Lobb in terms of the quality of the craft, but in terms of a direction, slightly not avant-garde. I wasn't really sort of in the realms of the avant-garde shoemakers like James Kearns, but just definitely going in a more design-led, I guess, direction.
So what changed that direction then? Was it? I mean, you've spent years working alongside your fellow
A
craftsman
very,
James
very
Ducker.
sensible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's sort of the dynamic of, I mean, Paul was great because he was prepared to kind of experiment a little bit, and his experience was so broad that he could draw on lots of elements and aspects of the traditional heritage craft, and kind of help me to shape what I wanted to do using those skills. Um, but James came to train with Paul when I'd been there for about a year, and he was a Lob apprentice. So it was very focused on learning the house style for Lob and following the sort of the very specific process of making. And we became friends. He stayed on training with Paul a little bit longer after I left. I set up my own little literally garden shed workshop, 6x4 brick built with a little heater in the winter, um, and was making for sort of friends and family, and just really starting to sort of get a feel for what I could do with the craft. And I spent a lot of the time talking to the postman. He became my best friend because it was really solitary. And I thought maybe it wasn't the healthiest of things to continue. So James and I would meet up every couple of months to kind of chat shoes and making and what we were doing. And over time, we started to talk about what if we worked together. how he would feel, because obviously he was trained by Lob. He wanted to give back to the company that had trained him. So how we would manage that. And we started to develop a sort of a sample collection together just to see how that process might work. And I am very much tenacious, I think could be one of the words you use. Small, like a small terrier that doesn't let go. So I did kind of pursue this idea of working with him. And at the same time, we realized that we had very complementary skills, and as people we were quite complementary. I'm quite hot, sharp, to the point, throw everything at it, and James is kind of pare it back, let's calm it down, so very quickly my sort of let's do this was kind of honed into something that would be marketable to our potential target audience.
Great. So it's very much been a building on both your strengths by the sound of it.
Yes.
So you're well known. Your expertise in bespoke shoemaking is very well known, and it's contributed to the preservation of traditional craftsmanship. How is this craft evolving today, especially with the rise of sustainable and handmade goods?
It's quite an interesting time. I think in terms of sustainability, you can't really get much more sustainable than hand-sewn bespoke. You know, we're working with oak bark leather from Bakers and Collerton. We're using vegetable tanned leathers, some from British Pastures leather, some from Italy. It's the two of us making. The shoes and boots are they're designed with materials so that they will last, so that they're repairable, so that they're durable. So it's a kind of, ours is a craft that we feel really ticks a lot of boxes in that respect. Where the challenges lie are in the sort of the enthusiasm for the shiny new materials, and leather being kind of pushed to one side as a result of that. And the conversations that used to happen around leather being, you know, it's a waste material, we've worked with for centuries, we know what it does and how long it will last and how it responds to making. So the sort of, we're having challenges, I guess, around those conversations about why it's still a waste material that needs to be used and to have value added to it. There's also, again, you know, sort of, you were asking the enthusiasm around the handmade. So it's sort of, as an established maker, the pressure is on us to increasingly present our sort of journey, our making, so that our customers understand why we charge what we do, why when we say handmade, it is, apart from the uppers being closed, literally handmade. So trying to help the customers to understand the differential between something that's handmade, that's been held against a machine in a factory, and what we do. So it's both an exciting and challenging time. In terms of the craft itself, it's developed in quite interesting directions. So for all the time that we've been teaching, we used to teach in a very sort of, not prescriptive, but it would be, you can make a pair of derbies, a pair of Oxfords, or this. And then gradually over time, we've seen the capabilities of some of those techniques and where they can be applied in other ways. And we've also had students who have brought to us ideas to sort of say, I mean, at the moment, we've just finished a pair of boots with a student who's working on her PhD. And so it was to introduce pegging, which is something that was used pre-industrial revolution. But you bring it into a sort of a modern context where you combine, so there's that sort of hybrid of craft, and suddenly it's really quite fresh. So I think there's a lot going on in those avenues where traditional skills are being taken in different directions. And obviously also with things like YouTube, we have, there's a lot of makers who are self-taught. So they might know aspects, so they might know elements of the traditional craft, but how they're then bringing those into their footwear is completely fresh and different. So it is quite exciting, I think.
Yeah, it's an exciting time, I think, especially with the heritage of shoemaking crossing over with um, the context of contemporary fashion. And I think a lot of designers are looking to incorporate more heritage techniques. Um, how how have these skills been maintained over the years? How is skills transmission happening now?
It's a, well, I think as we've seen across the university and college remit, that it's been an increasing pressure to deliver these courses and these to keep the skills going. So we originally started teaching in 2006 when cordwainers stopped teaching their hand sewn craft. And the routes into that craft were very traditional. So you would go, you would go in as an apprentice. So James had done a little bit of shoemaking. He brought some of the shoes that he'd made back to London. He got an appointment to see Lob. He presented his shoes and he was brought in as an apprentice. So he went through the very sort of traditional route. Mine was a completely kind of maverick approach to kind of to be funded by QEST to train as a, I've always been a bit of an outsider, and I think particularly taking that route into the training, I'm probably still seen as one. But what we've been doing in terms of training and giving others a springboard into the craft, it's changed how that craft is now accessible. So we have seen some of our students go on to be bespoke makers themselves. We hope that there is an increase in the craft being brought into the universities, but at the moment the universities are shrinking. So they're combining courses. They don't have the skilled experts who are teaching the craft. The students aren't getting making time. A lot of it is still sort of focused on CAD and design and not actually as much as I think it could be on construction. So there's a lot of gaps. But those who are coming through, so Olu, for instance, who's training at John Lobb as an apprentice, started his shoemaking with us and was determined that Lobb was where he wanted to train. That for him, that was, and his determination and grit to get there has paid off. So it is possible to kind of to take a combined route, if you like, into training.
Yes, you do a lot of teaching. I realise that.
Yeah.
You've spoken about it a bit, and it's something that we are really concerned about, but also I think we think there are reasons to be optimistic about the future of teaching for heritage crafts. Can you reflect on the changes that you've seen in the craft education and how this might be improved in the future?
Yes. So I mean, I don't mean to sound negative. It's just that is kind of the current position. What's encouraging is seeing the new government doing a swathe of research around what's being taught at schools and talking about broadening that education so that it's actually relevant to a future economy. So we there was a recent thing that sort of said, I think it was the day before yesterday, about that we're no longer in the top 10 in terms of manufacturing. But that isn't necessarily a reflection on the fact that we're doing less manufacturing. But I think if we're looking at sort of bringing more arts and crafts into school and education, it's important that there are places for those that are trained to go to, to work. So part of what's interesting, you were asking about sort of what's happened in terms of the hand sewn craft, is that there is more of a combination with manufacturing. So you have trickers with their bespoke in-house team, but they're a really well-established manufacturer. We offer a bespoke manufactured service. So that kind of taking, and you were talking also about, the brands and the sort of the key luxury goods are kind of looking at craft again, not necessarily just from a couture perspective, but just also from working alongside the existing craftspeople. So yes, what can be done better? I think we have to value craft. We have to pay for craft. We need to step away from business needs to move away from everything being measured on volume, how much you've sold, and that profit margin being based purely on volume. If we're going to really change things, we need to look at it is the, buy less, buy better.
Mm.
I was just having a look. I did make some points. So I think one of the things I think I mentioned earlier is that I did a sandwich degree. So one of the things that perhaps education could do a little bit better is about showing young people what opportunities there are available to them. The adage you have to see it to be it. So
Mm.
I had no idea. If I hadn't had that opportunity to go and work with trickers, I wouldn't have seen shoemaking. I wouldn't have known that that was something that I might consider doing. I had designed this collection, but I didn't necessarily know how to bring it to life. So the more we can bring craft in its broadest sense, so whether it's or creativity in craft in its broadest sense, so whether it's working in film and television, whether it's doing gaming, whether it's as an architect or engineering. So I really do think this concept of STEAM rather than STEM is a much more rounded way of creating, healthy young makers for the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We are obviously lobbying for that all the time through Heritage Crafts, and we really hope that the government's promise of a cultural superpower doesn't just come to bear. And we will be holding them to account on that. I was just reflecting on, as you've been talking about how you came in with sort of a much more kind of avant-garde creative approach. I mean, do you still get that satisfaction and creativity from what you're doing now? How do you satisfy that original urge in you to make things that are a bit more unusual?
So two things. One is the students. So our students, as I sort of mentioned, are increasingly coming to us with really out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't done using wooden pegs before. The student in question had been out to the States to study, came back, said, I'd like to do this. I went, well, give it a go, but you have to understand that I'll be doing some learning too. That was all good. And now I think there are about 3 or 4 of us who are going to be using that technique. We're working with another student who's making 70s boots, but his grandfather used to be a shoemaker from Italy, and he wanted to bring in the heritage skills. So we're doing a hybrid. So it's bringing in some of the woodworking skills that he's doing. We're doing pegging, and then we're doing hand welted, sole stitched 4-part. So the increasingly working with our students, they are fulfilling that little drive. And then the other stuff is the objects that I've started making. So working with the vegetable tanned leather, that's a kind of a slightly different outlet, but I think that's kind of giving me a lot of satisfaction at the moment.
That sounds really exciting. We started talking heritage crafts. I'm going off the questions that we
Go
planned
for
here. I
it.
hope you don't mind me winging it now, but we talk quite a lot about this ecosystem that exists in craft and how crafts are become interdependent. So you talked about bakers' veg tanned leather and their oak bark tanned leather. Are you seeing issues with supply and like that within the sector, or do you see those networks maintaining their connections?
I think at the moment there is it was probably a little wobbly post Brexit and COVID, but it feels quite steady at the moment. We also sell packs and kits of baker's leather online, so we're really encouraging anybody who comes to train with us to then buy those products because we consider them to be the best. I'm always amazed in online forums how little, not little, that's probably too sharp, but that there is the same questions are continually asked about where can I get this and where can I get that? And I'm always amazed at that bakers aren't kind of like the first suggestion, or so that, yeah, the networks are quite, but it is very small, and it worries me that the universities aren't focusing more on making and to ask whether that's what the industry needs. We need makers, we need manufacturers. I think we really need to be producing ourselves again, and that we need to then have courses that deliver students to do that.
Mm.
In terms of suppliers, we've worked with the same suppliers pretty much since we started the business. We've lost one or two. So we've always been really, that's why we really sort of started our supply shop, was really to try and drive, it's small, you know, everything that we do is quite micro, but to do our little bit to try and get our, you know, British leather out there and being used, because it's the best. There's only two places that do what bakers do, for instance.
Mm. Yeah. We've got Naomi here in the chat, who's introduced herself as a leather worker at Morgan and Wells, but is interested in starting to make barefoot shoes. Naomi, do you want to unmute yourself and have a chat with Deborah directly? Are you there?
Yes, I am, but I've also got my 3-year-old sat right next to me.
That's
so
absolutely
I think
fine.
just for all of our sanity's purpose, I'll put myself back on mute. But yeah, I'm just saying, my workshop's currently full of bakers. I absolutely love it.
Good.
So I've sort of last year made a bit of a decision to just go purely veg tan, and their leather is just phenomenal. So yeah, if anyone's not used them, it's totally second bakers. But yeah, so I've got it's a bit personal, but I've got very wide feet. And my husband's gone barefoot and I'm looking to go barefoot as well. And I've just got literally nowhere to go to sort of find information on making barefoot shoes, and the type of sole that they sort of recommend, because obviously it's not quite the standard shoe. So if you do have any tips, that would be grateful. Equally, I'm going to put myself back on mute because it's bedtime. So I am here, but I just don't want you to have a 3-year-old moaning down the camera.
Thanks, Naomi.
That's a really, so barefoot comes up from time to time. It's not for everybody. So I would recommend that you maybe talk to a physio or a podiatrist before you decide that that's the route for you. I was told that it wasn't suited for I've got quite wide feet. So much foot information, but this is what happens when you're a shoemaker. I've got wide feet, but there's something about the balance between the joint and the heel. So I always have to have a heel, even if it's just an inch. So barefoot's not for me. In terms of the structure, I would suggest having a look at turn shoes, maybe from the sort of the, what period would they be? Mid-1800s, I think, maybe a bit earlier. There's a company, if you message me, there's a company on Instagram that I follow that do what's it called? Heritage footwear. And the sort of the structure is kind of similar. It's very simple. There's very little between you and the ground. and it allows the feet to sort of to splay, to be provided for. So if you wanted to continue to work in the veg tan, that could be a way forward. In terms of the materials that they're made from, I think they're like a rubber molded. So it's not really something that you would be able to reproduce at home easily. That's about as far, I think, as I can go.
That's really interesting though, isn't it? How people are finding new ways to approach these crafts. I mean, we see some really interesting new approaches to quite a lot of crafts, and barefoot's quite an interesting new approach, I think. Naomi said, brilliant, there's lots of Vikings here in York, so turned is a great start. Biz, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, I think we have a great just clarifying question that I think probably a lot of people are thinking about, because they think of shoes, people making shoes, they think the word cobbler. Could you just kind of give a quick shoemaker versus cobbler? I think it kind of stems around educating just everyone. I mean, shoes is a consumer, everyone has a relationship to that. And, you know, that knowledge people don't really have. So could you just kind of give a quick and dirty
question?
Yes.
Love to. So it's very simple. A cobbler takes existing parts of a shoe or bits of shoes and literally cobbles together a new pair of shoes. And a cordwainer starts with the raw material. So we start with the pack of baker's leather, a pair of uppers and a pair of lasts. And that is the difference.
Okay, that makes complete sense. Love it.
So you describe yourself as a cordwainer sometimes.
Yes.
So is that
All
the
the
technical
time.
description of a handmade shoemaker?
Yes, as a cordwainer.
Okay.
Or if we're being a little bit facetious about it, we're also called snobs.
Okay.
Snob.
So what does that derive from?
I'm probably looking at cobblers and being mean.
Okay.
But to be honest, both are very skilled. So I don't know, it is a derogatory. And I think we use cobbler in a derogatory sense, but actually it's an amazing thing that cobblers can do. So you can have someone who takes a pair of sneakers to a cobbler who has a leg differential, and they will make a platform for them that you won't see, that's blended into the shoe. So they work miracles, particularly for people with specific foot problems like that. So in the past, that might have been a derogatory term, but there are some amazing, highly skilled cobblers in the UK.
Oh, that's so interesting. The terminology around and the words that have come into our language from craft is never fails to amaze me. We get a lot of maritime ones from boat building, but I think after that, I think a lot of them are leather and shoe related. Skiving off being another one, I believe. Yeah.
Well, skiving is certainly something that we do.
Yeah.
It's so contrary to skiving off. It's like one of the hardest techniques and a little bit dull sometimes, and you need a really sharp knife. So we do have the conversation. It's like, how does this mean skiving off? Because it can't be associated, but it may well be.
Oh, I was told it was because it's the only job that you did sitting down in the shoe factory.
Oh, you can do it standing up. That sounds like a good excuse for a sit down.
Yeah.
I'm going to skive.
Yeah. Well, I was told that, I think, by the ballet shoemakers, but I might be wrong. So how positive are you for the future of craft and craft networks? How are people engaging with craft? Are they coming in different ways, finding out about it in different ways? How are you seeing people coming into it?
It's again, it's a challenging one. I think I think we're very rich in organizations where people can access craft, but it's, I think, about taking craft out to communities. So QEST, for instance, works with employers in education and with the National Saturdays Club. So employers in education, we as scholars and alumni are encouraged to contact local schools and to go in and to do workshops, to talk about craft as a career path. And as I sort of mentioned before, not just from a kind of sole trader in the garden shed, but its context within the broader economy, whether that's costume design in theatre or film, puppetry, whatever it is. So to actually take it into schools. The National Saturdays Club runs workshops so that young people, particularly from disenfranchised backgrounds, can opt to go and be creative, and they commit to doing terms of craft activities. And I've been to the exhibition that they put on usually at Somerset House in the summer, and the work is exceptional. So that thing about encouraging diversity and accessibility, how we get more of that to happen, I'm hoping the government will do something about. But, you know, with yourselves, the Crafts Council, Cockpit Arts obviously has a business development plan for its craftspeople. I think the more we can get makers to go out into their local communities and to talk about what they're doing and to show people what they're doing, the better. I mean, young people are really engaging, and there's obviously a lot of access online, whether it's, you know, TikTok or Instagram or Pinterest, but that's quite a static involvement. It's not involving actively. And they still say that, according to survey says, that they still want that face-to-face. So they want to see people at fairs. They want to sort of touch and experience. So the more we can put out there to encourage young people to get involved, to act.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we hear a lot from craftspeople, which I don't think we really buy, is that young people are not interested in hands-on craft anymore, and they're only interested in their phones. We're not convinced.
That's so untrue.
Yeah,
no.
Well, we think it's a lazy assumption, and that they can't really know about it if they can't be interested in something they don't know about or haven't been exposed to.
That's the thing. I mean, school has, you know, the sort of the I was really, you know, I might have gone to a really academic school, but there was an amazing art room and it was open, and I went and spent time in it because I wasn't good at much else. And I think if those facilities aren't available to young people, how can they explore whether that's something for them? So with the, you know, the government's talking about having these, you know, new colleges, whatever avenue, I think we need to say that that is something that's valuable to do, to pursue craft, to pursue a creative career. And the only way they're going to get to see that as an opportunity is for it to be available at school initially. And if not at school, outside school, you know, sort of, we've got museums putting on workshops, you've got libraries putting on workshops. It's just like, it's how you make that more I was sort of thinking there's wonderful I watch in Holland, they have that wonderful thing where they have older people living with young people who are students and kind of looking out and hanging out with each other. And you sort of think, well, there's so much heritage craft with people who are knitters or crocheters, or who have stopped, either because they don't have access to the tools and materials anymore, or just, I guess, they've become old and just don't have that kind of the need to do it. And you sort of think, well, if you could mix up taking, you know, primary school kids into care homes and have them doing stuff together, or having people who are knitters to kind of go out into schools and do knitting workshops. That could be at any age. I don't know how you actually make all of this happen, but it seems like a really lovely, lovely thing to do. There are so many people with skills that,
yeah, and I think you can't
get to use them.
Yeah, you can't discount those skills that people have in a amateur and domestic setting as well. They're also so important in our heritage, and important.
Well, I think the one thing we can't be is arrogant or snobbish about craft in whatever form it comes. It's like, it is, It's just the mental health benefits, the wellness, the the community interaction is that so outweighs sort of anything else.
Mm. So reflecting on that then, do you think the way that the craft sector had the trajectory of the craft sector has been over the past 20 years, do you think that's put off people who might be engaging in a more amateur way if they feel like they can't aspire to being that very high-end contemporary crafts practitioner?
It's funny, isn't it? It's sort of that you can't just do the doing for the sake of the doing. Like, not everybody wants to have that aspiration. It doesn't always have to. So even for young people having access to craft, that doesn't have to be their career choice, but it could be something that gives them the wellness and mental health benefits that enables them to do a different kind of job. Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of, I think it's it is a challenge because at one end we have the likes of collect, and you have work which, because it's shown on a pedestal in a certain way, that has a certain value associated with it. And then you've got people making for the joy of making, and they might want to make a little bit better, or they might just want to continue practicing the way that they do. And I just sort of think I think we shouldn't be elitist and snobbish about it.
Well, I'd like to lobby for a pair of shoes to be on a plinth that collect.
Well, it was wonderful to see the woven shoes at the Royal the summer show. It was like brilliant.
Yeah, so that's one of our members. That's Felicity Irons.
Yes,
amazing. Rush weaver. For those who are not familiar with her, she wove a pair of rush shoes that are in the exhibition this summer, which is amazing.
But that was really encouraging. There were a few craftspeople that I know who had entered, and it's not known for selecting craft. So it was really, and that again sort of, I hope, inspires people to try things.
There was a skep as well. I spotted a straw bee skep inspired piece as well.
You're going to have to tell me what a skep is now.
It's a straw beehive that is made, yes, from coiled straw that's stitched together with bramble or cane.
Oh, gorgeous.
Yeah, so there was a skep inspired piece I was quite excited to see. We've got another question from Naomi. Naomi, do you want to ask it, or do you want me to ask it on your behalf? Oh, she says go ahead. So in your marketing, how do you put across your message that you hand stitch in a way that people understand the benefit of it?
God, that's such a difficult question. And it's such a difficult thing to do. So I don't think we've really still got it right. We did a film for the Design Museum. So our film of making is in the Design Museum. And that shows the making process. But I don't think it answers all the questions. And so what we do now is, whenever we're teaching or we're making, we'll do a little reel or a story or a image, just to reinforce that this is what a hand sewn shoe looks like. But I don't think it always goes in, and we still have people who will come into the workshop and look at the uppers and assume that those are hand stitched, and we have to then talk them through the process. So we've got images in the workshop that show, again, which we've had since we started, that show the making process. But I think it is just repetition. I can't think I've yet to come up with like the genius solution to show how it works.
It's really hard because there's so much craft washing and words like crafted and bespoke and are used so much across the trades when they're quite misleading at
Terrible.
times.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, you've got all the fashion brands are talking about they're talking about natural veg tanned leather or natural leather or not chrome or chrome free. And it's chrome tanning is no longer carcinogenic. It serves a purpose because it enables the mass production to use more of the hide, so there's less waste. It really has a job to do, and there's only so much real oak bark tanning that can be done because you need some oak bark, and there's only so many. You know, Japan has a great way of pruning so that the trees never die. It's that as always just genius solutions. So you've got that going on. You've got so you've got lots of vegan leather. I'm gritting my teeth as I say those words. And again, it's not proven. We yet to have, 400 years of testing. There are some great alternatives coming up, but they are the main waste material that we still have is leather because we still eat meat. So you just have to be really, really careful about it. And it's really difficult as a consumer to know exactly what you're getting. I've fallen foul.
Yeah,
Deborah,
absolutely.
I'm going to ask a question myself, if that's okay, Mary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of piggyback off of Naomi's question, but in terms for the consumer, we've talked a lot about the skills, people who want to get involved in the skills, also those who have you're preaching to the choir. I think we're all pro craft and bespoke and handmade in this room, but for people who are just consuming shoes, everyone, at some point has a relationship with them. It's a similar thing with clothes, that it's gone into area where you just go to whatever is closest fit to your body on your feet, and moving away from the bespoke for quite some time now. And, is there something you wish people generally would understand around shoe consumption and,
Stop.
having,
If you've looked at just all of it, stop. We don't need all of the stuff that we're buying. We don't need it. If you're going to buy sneakers, buy them from Helen Kirkham, because she recycles old sneakers and puts new soles on them. Or buy them from a cobbler there's an amazing Italian guy I follow on Instagram who takes these cruddy old trainers, takes everything off, strips them back and rebuilds them. So, and don't wear sneakers. Because you wear them for 4 to 6 months, you chuck them away and they go into landfill, or they sit on the Atacama Desert. I don't know if you've seen pictures of the Atacama Desert, but it is covered in our detritus. There are mountains and mountains of clothes and shoes.
Wow.
So just stop. If you're going to buy a pair of shoes, I know you're asking about fit, but if it tweaks when you put them on, it's going to tweak a lot harder when you've walked for 100 yards, and it's going to tweak a lot harder when it's really hot. So don't buy them. And just try and find a manufacturer whose shoes that you like and that fit and that will last you or can be repaired, which is not usually sneakers.
So I almost wonder if we can have like a cheat sheet and almost promote your like recommended list of places to go.
Our heritage clogs.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yes, you have you've been departing into clog making recently, haven't you?
Oh, well, not us, but we're championing British clog makers, of which there are 3 left, and we're doing a Kickstarter with Phil Howard, and it is to shine a spotlight on clog making because it is critically endangered, and they're bloody brilliant. They're the most comfortable things in this weather. Pop a pair of clogs on, you're laughing.
Well, we should do some more promotion about that. So on that note, just before I ask the last question, then, do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to put their hand up and ask a question? Angela Middleton has posted a link in the chat around the archaeological leather group, which looks really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Angela. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, I'll carry on then. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, we've got a few minutes left. What can we do better? So what does so obviously we are in a bit of a craft zeitgeist at the moment. It's quite an exciting time to be involved in crafts. But how can organisations like Heritage Craft support people like you better? How can we make sure that more people are learning and becoming aware of shoemaking and heritage crafts?
I think you do a fantastic job. I think getting the UNESCO signing finally done is a big win. I'm hoping it's going to be more than just a list, which is what the previous government said. I think
for those who are not familiar with this, this is
yes.
This is the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's something we've been lobbying for some time, and it means that things that are not tangible, not the objects themselves, can be valued for their cultural value. So things that can't be put in cases, like our folk songs, our traditions, and our skills and knowledge of crafts. So we're quite excited about this because we think it promotes the idea of craftspeople as contributors and holders of heritage.
I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, and you've got an exciting new project coming up around this as well, haven't you? Are you happy to talk about that?
My PhD, which I will be starting in September, is in tangible cultural heritage and around shoemaking, but I have yet to define exactly what it will be. As a craftsperson, I never thought I would do a PhD. It's something that seemed completely out of my reach and out of my remit. And then we have had numerous people through the door training with us who have done PhDs, are doing PhDs, including this wonderful woman who was in her early 70s, who was starting an MA at Cambridge. And I just went, well, bloody hell, if you can do it, I'll give it a go. So this one popped up and I went, I'm going to have a go at it. And I was very fortunate to be chosen. So I'm really excited. And it feels like I want it to give me a voice as a craftsperson, which I currently don't feel I have, that sort of that status, that voice, which sounds probably a little bit pretentious, but it's not meant to. It's just, as a craftsperson, I don't feel that I have the same level of value as someone who's a lecturer at a university, even though what I'm passing on in terms of intangible skills is something that very few other people could. So it's a chance to pop a little bit of legacy down and capture, hopefully, some of those intangible skills. In terms of what could be done better, I just think it's about, I would like to see it better linked up. So it's sort of so that the cockpits, the crafts councils, the QEST, the HCA are working as a network together, offering different things, providing a sort of that touch point, that database, that access to, and I think you each do it really, really well, but it's kind of that cohesion would make it so much easier as a maker or as someone wanting to access that. But I also know that that's very difficult to do because it is a competitive market in terms of funding and, without also then sort of denying the work that you've already done to achieve what you have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we see it as competitive. I think we see each other as, hopefully see each other as complementary. I think one of the challenges is also about making sure that people have the best access that they can to the support that we can offer as different organisations. So making sure that offer is really clear, I think, between the different organisations, because we've got some exciting crossovers, and I think we just need to make sure our resources are distributed as well as we can, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's sort of you're all, it's small teams doing amazing stuff, so it's kind of just making sure that every bit of it makes the difference and sort of really counts.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And, the new awards you've got are fantastic. It's great to see they're sort of coming one after the other.
So on that note, we do have, just finding the details. So we are having our we have got our Leather Worker of the Year award coming up, sponsored by the British Leather Industry Development Trust. And we've also got a Young Leather Worker of the Year award sponsored by the Leather Sellers Foundation. So they're both currently open with a closing date of 6th of September. So you can nominate yourself, or you can nominate somebody else who you think might be a worthy candidate. So any leather workers here in the room, please do think about that. Erin had a question. You're a PhD, so you will be a doctor of what?
I don't know yet. A doctor of intangible cultural heritage. I don't know. I'm still getting to grips. I haven't, like, this is the first public thing that I've really said about doing it. I haven't told many people because it was a real pinch me kind of thing. Like, I did jump up and down and go, oh my God, I'm doing it. And I couldn't do it without James's support, obviously, because the business is going to continue and I intend to do it full time, but I can work a little bit. So without him being, fully on board, I wouldn't have the chance to do it. So I'm not sure what I'm going to be a doctor of. Shoemaking, who knows?
But I think what you've said, I think you expressed it very well about how you feel about your skills and knowledge and being recognised for those skills and knowledge, because we think that is one thing that is often the case with heritage crafts practitioners or crafts practitioners in general, that they don't necessarily see themselves as having that unique knowledge, and also that society doesn't perceive them as being holders of these incredible skills. So I think, that if the PhD is a way of recognising that.
Well, I know it seems a bit extreme, but to the extent that I've told people I'm doing a PhD, and they've sort of gone, "Oh, are you doing that is that a distance learning, or is that as though it's not a proper PhD?"
Not a proper PhD.
And you're going, "Oh, come on!" So I rest my case. So I'm taking the fight to the academic world. We'll see how it goes.
Thank you very much. So on that note, I think that's a very strong position to end on, a strong message. And I'd like to say thank you from all of us at Heritage Crafts and everybody here this evening. And yes, I'll say goodbye and hope you have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you for hosting me. It's been lovely to chat to everybody. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll speak again soon.
Cheers.